Hi, welcome to the Bucky call for this weekend, March 18th and 19th, I think it is. I don't know why the print on my computer keeps getting smaller and smaller and harder to read. And so,
Hmm.
depending on what continent you're on, good morning or a good evening. And so, Joe, how you feeling this evening or this morning, and this evening for you? And what do you expect to get out of tonight's call?
I feel great. I'm glad I'm here, and it's been an interesting day, and I'm really looking forward to continuing with the Grunch of the Giants. I really think this is a book actually that you can go through multiple times. It's like most Bucky books, but I think this has the timing of this book is particularly unique. With what's going on with the financial system right now. And so I think that that I feel very fortunate to be here with both of you, and to be going through this book this evening. Manu, my friend, thank you for being here as always and getting up on Sunday morning. How do you feel? What would you like to take away from the day?
I feel I feel privileged, and I'm grateful to be here, to be able to be here in spite of going to bed quite late yesterday. I had a very nice conversation with Kelly, by the way.
Oh, I was going to ask.
Yeah, I spoke with Kelly and Anne. He told me he's doing well. It's just that he can't yet join. He was very excited about Wayne project on children's abundance. And yeah, so he is there, like he's accepted what is pretty positive that is going to come through it. And he joined us whenever that will be possible for him to join us. But he was really, really happy to hear that we continuing and that we are studying and we're trying to apply things. So he sends the regards. So otherwise, what I expect of this meeting is that maybe in light of Grunch of Giants, we could discuss what is going on in the international financial sector and by extension in the world today. So that's my expectation. And to the dear Susan, how do you feel? What's your expectation, Susan?
I am super happy to. It's so funny because last night when I was talking to my mom, she asked me how Kelly was doing. And I have on purpose not tried too much to communicate. Just I kind of felt like he needed more space, but it's so perfect that you would come on and you would have handled that for me. So thank you. I just want to keep exploring and opening perspective. I will be home shortly, so I'll be able to get on a stationary computer, but I didn't want to miss more than I had to. I don't know who else is left.
Steve.
It's me.
Steve, how do you feel? And what would you like to get out of today?
Good, thank you, Susan. I'm glad you're here. I mentioned earlier I got an email from John that he won't be able to make it, John Butler, but there's still a possibility. I'm so glad you were able to finish your surgery and join us. So maybe a couple of other people, Anne or Julian, may join us. We'll have to see. I'm feeling. What's that? Okay, I'm feeling kind of. Wow, it's just really weird that we're reading Grunch of the Giants about the banking system and how what's wrong with the banking system, and then here we are sitting here with our Silicon Valley bank crisis with $42 billion bank, and that's how it's affecting other fringe banks across the world, actually. And everything seems to be stable and everything seems to be fine. But I mean, all we have to do is make rules. All we got to do is go back to Glass-Steagall, and and things would be fine. Just banks are just not. They're taking too many risks, and they can be too aggressive. And I think that's one of the issues that Bucky likes to talk about here in Grunch of the Giants. So we're going to continue to read. We have about 10 more pages to go, and then we're done with the book. So we need to be anticipating what our next challenge will be for the group, and we'll probably have 2 or 3 weeks before we have to decide. So I expect we'll continue to make progress in the group and with our reading, and I expect that I hope I don't get too frustrated as I listen to how logical Bucky is and how everything he's talking about in 1985 just keeps coming back on our faces here 50 years later. Just absolutely amazing. So with that, we will go ahead and I'll bring up the book. It's right here. I just got to find it. There we go. And we can rotate some reading around if we want to do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Do you want to start, Joe, or do you want me to pick it
I
up
can
here?
start.
Let you
I can
jump in.
start.
Okay.
If you guys want to comment after the first sentence, feel free.
Oh.
I'm just joking.
But the book is not there, it's not yet showing, Steve.
Yeah, Steve is not showing.
It should be showing.
No.
Just the
Oh,
titles.
I thought you were
That's-
waiting for you. Oh.
Wait a minute. You do not see my screen share?
We can see your
I
screen.
see your
but
screen share, not your book.
You haven't opened the book.
I'm sitting on the book, guys. Let me see
I
if
think you have to close and open again.
I'm going to I'm on my screen, and I think I clicked on the wrong thing. How's that?
There you are.
That works. Yeah.
Okay, very, very good. I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay. We're rolling.
In the September 1, 1981, sales of U.S. Treasury 90-day notes, which were almost certainly redeemable before any U.S. government bankruptcy payment defaults, produced yields that were momentarily higher than the earnings of many high-grade corporate shares. Until the summer of 1981, these short-term high-yield government notes had been sold only in minimum lots, the prices of which have been beyond the everyday buying scope of individual citizens by at a negligible prices to the supranationals or any of their world banks. It is now far more risky to buy U.S. government securities than it is to buy shares in what was Risk Capital's economic venture corporation shares. There is nothing in the words or spirit of the U.S. Declaration of Independence or U.S. Constitution which states or suggests the USA is committed exclusively to the success of the rich. The USA we have known is now bankrupt and extinct. The swift coming. Yeah.
So, yes, I'll just like us that paragraph to comment it in light of what is happening. And I would like to hear from you. What's your take on what is happening?
Well,
what happened in the first place? Can somebody explain to me in simple words?
I think that this is Bucky's opinion. There are a lot of people that talk about the fact there are a lot of conspiracy theory guys that talk about the fact that there's the bankruptcy of the federal government, there's some corporate manipulation, and that there's a corporation running the US, not the actual federal government, because the actual federal government is bankrupt, and there's this corporation put in place to distract everybody, and so the US can run its business. But this is a conspiracy theory kind of approach to a thing. I don't know exactly what he's saying here when he says that the U.S. is now bankrupt and extinct, other than maybe he has a personal opinion about it and he's declaring his opinion. He just didn't say it was his opinion. Now that's my summary of it. Joe, what is your take on all that?
I mean, as far as I'm not totally clear, but I will say this, that the value of bonds itself, I mean, what's going on as far as that's concerned, the value of the bonds within Silicon Valley Bank, essentially they had purchased bonds that were now worth less, and they were actually in a position where they actually needed capital, and they actually had to sell their bonds at a loss, which bankrupted them. Now, how that relates back to this per se, I have to think about it in the sense that, I mean, I would say this: the buying scope of individual citizens, but at negligible prices to the supranationals or any of their world banks. I have to think about it. I got to be honest. This paragraph is a little bit of a mystery to me.
Well, I'm going to say one more thing about it, because there's a definite, as you mentioned, Joe, there's a definite relationship between bonds and stocks. And as interest rates go up, the value of bonds goes down. And as interest rate goes down, the value of bonds go up. The benefit of bonds, is they're set for a term. Short term, 6 months, 9 months, or 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. And what Silicon Valley Bank did was they bought 5 and 10-year bonds, or some amount of bonds. When the interest rates were low, they bought bonds which had a high value. But the problem was those bonds are long-term bonds. So when the interest rates started to shift and go up, something was amiss on that strategy, and somebody at that bank should have woken up and started selling short or doing something, and they didn't do it. Maybe they were told on the inside that the Fed wasn't going to keep raising the rates. Maybe they were asleep. Who knows? But somebody wasn't responsible in terms of that bank's planning to see that interest rates were going up in the long haul and the value of their assets were moving down. If the government just passed a law that said, look, you bought long-term assets that have a value, we're going to acknowledge that, and we're going to skip the fact that the bonds at the present moment are worth less than they were when you bought them, but over the long haul will be fine. That's great. But the vultures in Wall Street don't want to tolerate they don't want to tolerate a calm and cool attitude. They're like vultures, and they like to jump in and make things tough on people. So the guys with the money keep buying up more stuff. This is the problem. It comes back.
I will say,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
No, that's right.
I cut you off.
Well,
I was
just going to summarize the statement. I was just going to summarize the statement, but I'm happy to turn it over, because what I was going to say was, he's talking about a situation back in the 80s, which I think is long resolved. We pulled out of that just fine, if you want to call our current banking system just fine. When he stays here, the U.S. as we have known is now bankrupt. I don't know what he means by U.S. we have known. I think he's talking
Sweetheart,
about
that bank, the U.S. has been bankrupt for a hell of a long time. And if the same rules applied to government that are pushed to apply to us as citizens, or even to individual corporations, that would be completely clear and in the open. They have the power to continue the charade of being a nation of integrity, like when we were founded. And the government doesn't play by its own rules.
Yeah.
So it's been bankrupt a really long time.
Yeah, from that,
And I'm
So-
sorry, Joe, I jumped right over the top of you.
yeah.
That's
I think
quite all right.
That's Bucky's point of view right there, Susan. I think you just summarized it. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I think an important point now that I'm just going back through this, it is now far more riskier to buy US government securities than it is to buy shares. What was once risk capital's economic venture corporation shares. Well, that's a happen in a way. You know,
Okay.
they bought the shares, they bought corporate bonds. And so that was the risk that in a sense they bought them at a very low yield. And the value of those bonds have then since decreased. So there is a certain truth to what I guess to this that it was risky to invest in bonds and treasuries.
Okay, let's take it this way. And let's go to the fundamental. And Joe and Steve say something important. When interest rates are up, the bond price is down. When it's down, the bond price is up. So there's this inverse relationship between interest rate and thing.
Mhm.
Now, do you think that the interest rate were too low for too long?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
I
think
induced
there
by
were
the
two-
by the COVID environment. The interest rate kept low just to keep the economy keep moving, even though it was shut down.
I thought it was too low during the initial .com boom.
What year was that? That'd be 2000, right?
Prior to that, so in 98 or 97, I thought it was too low then.
Yeah.
In other words, you know, the economy was overheating at that point. And so I think there were issues at that, you know.
So Joe, you're saying that is a 25-year trend of
Yeah.
interest rate being low till last year.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that
essentially,
is 25 years of appreciation of long-term securities. Whether it being stock or bonds, if interest rates were kept low for too long, the consequence is that long-term securities are higher prices. So therefore, executives in banks or executive in business or people that are in charge of investing, they make decisions, right?
Mhm.
They make decisions about where to place the cash.
right.
So they play the cash into those instruments.
Here's a little note. I said, what was the average interest rate in the US in 1986? And it brings out that in 86, now this is a 30-year mortgage rate. So this doesn't do a bond versus mortgage comparison, but the interest rate was 10.36%. And then in 85, it was 12. And in 84, it was 13.8. So about the time that Bucky was writing this book, we had pretty good interest rates. I remember paying 18 and 24% interest because I was doing short-term commercial loans, and I was making a heck of a lot of money because real estate was inflating. I could buy a property and it would be worth 50% more in 18 months. And
But Steve, what happened that was noticed by a lot of people was there was inversion of a yield curve. That happened since I think it's a couple of years now, Joe.
Yeah.
So inversion of a yield curve means that prices are too high. Because it says that
Right.
what you would expect on the long term is actual fact is going to be cheaper than what, no, it's going to be more expensive for you to have than what you have today. We should be the other way. You discount the
Right.
future
That's right.
because there's more uncertainty. And that's what probably misled on the bigger picture, those executives at the bank. But the big issue to me is, not to me, that have been raised by some people is this one. The bank was Bair, whole, right?
The
Yeah.
bank was what?
Those three banks were Bair or Silicon Valley Bank, SVB.
Well, they were not bailed. In other words, the government came out and said, don't worry, even though we're going to make sure that even the uninsured deposits were good. And then the commercial banks got around and put a fund together and they bailed out the bank. The US government didn't do it.
Yeah. But
Well,
they're
that's
also
the,
borrowing.
hold on, Steve. That is the same. So that bank was bailed out, right?
Right. It was bailed out by other banks who build an insurance fund. So basically, other banks put up a bond that said they'll cover any of those things. And then the US government, the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, came out and said, look, back in 2008, we guaranteed accounts of 100 grand prior to 2008. When 2008, the crisis came, they upped their guarantee to 250. There's been talk now, rumblings in the background, that they're going to raise their guarantee from 250 to 500 or 750. And because that's what they did in 2008 relative to inflation and everything. And the other issue is that Silicon Valley Bank is when in the Silicon Valley, when you have employees and investment costs, just to do payroll, you have to be more than 250 grand. You have to run around $10 million in your transaction account just to keep up with your cash flow. Those transaction accounts are not insured in the United States. However, one of the conversations now is, and I just listened today to a podcast with the FDIC, former FDIC chair, said that they had a law where they insured transaction accounts, and just recently Congress took it away and gave it to somebody else. So the FDIC doesn't insure transaction accounts, but a transaction account is not an investment account. There's nothing speculative about it. It's where payroll goes in and out, and it should be guaranteed. And they say that to have that kind of account be in jeopardy because of some other banking issue is not considered. They're irrelevant, and they need to guarantee and insure transaction bank accounts rather than investment accounts. So there's
But
that you're doing as well.
Steve, I just want to understand well. In the SVB case,
Yeah.
the FDIC lifted a cap completely for everybody, right? It
They
didn't
lifted-
matter how much deposit you have.
They lifted a cap. The FDIC lifted a cap. No, they just said they were going to do a stopgap and make sure that all the accounts were insured.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Nobody knows what it means.
So in this particular case, in
Yeah.
point, that's what happened.
Well, that's what they're talking about happening. I don't think it's happening.
No, it happened already. It happened in that, everybody, everything. Yeah.
Again, there's
Sure.
I thought my understanding is that anything over $250,000 was not necessarily insured.
That's right.
And
And
that and so that that's an interesting rule in and of itself, because even the way that has to be paid out is interesting. But the whole thing with this situation, I mean, the way it evolved and the way it's working now is essentially that these other banks that are also struggling, that the Fed is actually loaning money to the JP Morgans and the banks that have stronger balance sheets. I think they borrowed something like 150 billion this week or something like that, who are then recapitalizing these other banks. And it's kind of just, I don't, it just using, their borrowing power, and they're filtering the money through bigger banks to recapitalize these other small banks. I mean, SVB was a small boutique bank that actually was primarily focused on startups. And I actually know somebody that was even associated with them, that said that they were uniquely set up to handle startups. So the startups, like the way they were, even just the way they were structured and the way their payment systems were even set up, so that that they're scrambling now.
Yeah.
So that there's, and again, this all comes down to supposedly a gross mismanagement at the top, where they were, they didn't balance the risk in their portfolio. And but I think the overarching theme here is that it shows you how fragile the system is. I mean, and it shows you how close we are, or can be, to a collapse of some sort. And I think that that's a much more, I think that's the message that we need to be concerned about, is just how fragile the system is. So, I mean, and so that's my understanding of it. And I think what this is essentially the banks are just going to bail each other out in this particular instance, but it doesn't necessarily answer the underlying issue. And they're going to pass laws that, I don't know, that are probably not necessarily going to answer the problem.
Right. In other words,
The only thing, Joe,
fragile. I just want to say, you say it's fragile, it's just unregulated, and it's Wild West, and the money guys are just taking care of themselves. And I think, to Susan's point, the US government just keeps raising their debt ceiling in order to not be accountable for what's going on. That's the point. Joe, I mean, Manu.
okay. Practically, SVB and all the deposit were Bair, right? And you say that banks are putting together funds to bail out those banks, those smaller banks, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I want to touch on the moral hazard issue.
Mm-hmm.
First thing that you look at is that the small bank, who are their own, who own them? Who owns them?
SVB?
Yes. Who controls SVB?
Shareholder.
SVB is owned by all of those big guys. You say it was
SVB wasn't owned by all of those big guys. SVB had a few board of directors and a few venture capitalists who were behind SVB. They were a $42 billion bank in a $250 billion bank environment.
Wait, Steve. I just wanted to drive in the stuff here. Is it true that people are withdrawing their deposit from smaller banks and putting them in larger banks in US now? Has it ticked up? It's not true.
No.
Okay.
The average person, Zions Bank here, which is a state chartered NA, National Association Bank. I was just in the hot tub with him at the spa this last week. He's a big wig at Zions Bank. Zions Bank is just fine. There's no problem. They send out a bunch of emails to people to say, don't worry, nothing's happening to them, it's happening to us. And that's going on with most banks. There's very little rustle on a statewide basis in Utah about anything. It's just national news about Silicon Valley Bank and joint venture capitalists and how irresponsible they've been.
But what do you make about all the links that are with these banks today? Not only nationally in the US, but internationally.
Now, Steve, I'm going to give you a contrasting exposure. I know our business. So gosh, and I think we're somewhere between 12 and 30 million a year. In our practice, maybe up to 50 million now that we've done the merger. But we're with Alliance Bank, which is a regional bank. And I got to tell you, there's already been emails sent out in our corporate, our tiny corporation saying, you know what, we're probably going to also open another account at a Chase or whatever. And we're watching very carefully. I mean, after what you had said about credit unions, I was heartily thinking about making that switch myself, but this whole thing going on makes me not want to leave Chase. Not because I think Chase is a good player, but I know they're too big to fail.
That's an issue, moral hazard.
Yeah, it's a moral hazard because I don't think there's any morality about Chase Bank or B of A. And I'm not even sure Wells Fargo might be okay to fail. Probably not, since they didn't really get held with their feet to the fire for some of their other poor business practices.
Well, Susan, if you're a bank, you said you're doing about 50 million a month through that bank, right?
No, 50 million a year.
Oh, 50 million a year through so that's roughly 10 million, 8 million a month that you're running through the thing, which is exactly what I talked about, these transactional banks doing 10 million. And the idea is that transactional accounts have a different status with the FDIC, not legally. It used to have a different legal status, but the Congress shifted things around because these Wall Street guys are just lobbying like mad in the US. The Congress does whatever it wants to do, but you have a different status, and your SVB and your regional bank can get special insurance for your account. You can buy special insurance, add-on insurance.
Well, I guess we got to figure that out because it wasn't something we were thinking about 6 months ago. It's something we're definitely thinking about now.
But Steve, what does buying insurance mean?
That means
What does
that
buying special insurance mean?
means
It's a cost to you, isn't it?
well, it costs the bank, and then that gets passed on to the savings guys. Listen, I just listened to a podcast today with John Stewart, Mark Cuba, that guy, and the ex-president of the FDIC, and they had a really good conversation. It was an hour and a half long, and I'd love to send you that link, Susan.
That'd be great.
Mark Cuban is one of the owners of SVB.
He was I don't think he was an owner. He would have said that. He did have money there. He had
Big
one
money.
of his businesses was running a transactional account through there. So I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing. And I'm going to send out that. In fact, anybody's interested, I'll put the link in this thing as well as send it to you, Susan.
Great.
I think this is very scary, this situation. It's very, very scary. It doesn't look like, but it's very scary. It doesn't need a US bank to fall, but just an international bank like a Credit Suisse that a lot of people are talking about today.
Yeah, that's true.
You remember in 2008, it was BNP Paribas, the French bank. So all of these banks are interlinked in a way that is very, very intense.
So I think it's interesting when we talk about funds and cash and accounting. We are not talking about money. We're talking about basically digital currency, and we're talking about something that is a fractional reserve currency, and I can't even tell you what fraction they're using any longer. So it is a complete fiction. The only people that are held to actual accounting are individuals.
Mhm.
And so it's currency, and it's digital currency now, and it's fractional reserve of some popcorn fart fairy dust.
Well, a figure,
Yeah,
Susan, a figure that somebody gave. I'm sorry to Kajuba, I just wanted to buttress that. That the FDIC fraction is something like 0.01%.
Right. Yeah.
Because they say the FDIC, I don't know how much, it was in the order of billion, right? Their reserves. And they insure something like 30 or 40 trillion.
Mhm.
All right,
So they had 42 billion withdrawn in one day, and that ended them. So I don't know what the actual amount that they're actually, what the value of the bank is.
No, I'm not talking about SVB, Joe. I say
Oh, okay.
FDIC,
Oh, okay. Oh, the
the Federal
FDIC.
Deposit Insurance Corporation.
Oh, yeah.
Their leverage is the stream. And that's the leverage, the general leverage of a banking system in the world.
Yeah.
And the bailout that's coming from private banks is basically a leveraged bailout. In other words, those big banks are putting in 10% or 5% or something and saying, okay, we pledge our collateral, but we're going to stick in this little amount of money. There's the bond. And so here's a little bit of cash, but here's the insurance to try to take the pressure off. So it's a way to stall, at least. They actually talk about the fractional lending, transactional accounts, savings accounts, the status of SVB. And in that little podcast that I just stuck on into the chat. So it'll be in the chat for those who are listening to this call after the fact. And Susan, you already have it on your phone.
Thank you, sir. Yeah,
But
John,
you remember last week, Steve and Joe, we read something, or 2 weeks ago. That was to say, does all of this create any iota of good or real service?
No, it doesn't. Susan, what were you about to say?
So
John,
if it doesn't create, all of this is just hot air.
Yeah.
It's inflation, because that's the other word that we're not talking about. The US
No, that's huge.
instead of with increase of interest rate, that's why the interest rate has been multiplied by what? 4, 3?
With the interest rate?
The current interest rate, yes. The Fed rate went from what to what in a very short time.
almost 5.
It was, yeah, I think the answer
So
is
it went
they're actually going
from 1 to 5, right?
Yeah, I think with
That is
that
four-
point
that
rate,
is
I think
4
we're
times
close to
increase.
7 actually. For some reason, I thought we were higher than that.
It's
That's 4 or
4.58.
5.
It's 4.58 Federal Reserve Funds rate,
Oh,
right?
Yeah. So it
30,
went
30 years or so.
It went up 4-fold. That was supposed to have a lasting impact on inflation. But inflation is still raging. We're
Yeah.
talking about the manipulated CPI or whatever that we see.
Yeah, it's all. I like
And
Susan.
the real inflation is, I don't know how much it is. In other terms, for the average person, the purchasing power has been clipped by how much?
Feels like more than 20%.
Yeah. It is scary, I'm saying. We're talking about leveraging on this system that we're studying. We extremely leverage.
Well, I want to just say again that back in 1985, 86, when Bucky wrote this book and talked about the US being bankrupt, I was borrowing money at 18 to 24% and was making a lot of money, and the economy just went fine and motored through it. I think that Susan's word fiction is really powerful, because the big guys are just creating a fiction to run their story to get more money. And to get too nervous about any of it, I think, is to fall into the trap of the giants. They want me to be afraid. They want me to be worried. They want to control me.
But Steve, in 1980, what happened in 1986, 87, or 88?
Well, that's where we had the savings and loan debacle, the crash of the savings.
Exactly. And what did it do to the commoner?
Well, I don't think the common person, I don't think it affected much. What happened was all those loans that the savings and loans had went into the RTC, the Restoration Trust Corporation, and were being sold to hedge funds and to individual investors who would buy them. So, you know, the whole thing is just it's just a fiction in order to take the money.
Transfer of wealth.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what's really frustrating is I just listened to Bernie, my man Bernie
Sanders.
Sanders. He is talking at the UK, and I just listened to a big conversation with him, where he was talking in the UK, spent an hour and a half telling about what's going on in America and how these guys who are making millions of dollars a year resist giving a living wage to their employees.
But we asked the question last time. I have issues with the word wage. Susan, you employ somebody in your business. Just, you know, you are influenced by nothing. But you need this person tomorrow. Wage, that is your daily exchange for your work. How much will you gauge in the bargaining with that person? The wage in such a way that the person comes tomorrow. Are you going to pay him what he needs to just get away from you? Or will you pay him something that will frustrate him? No, let me just put it this way. Are you going to pay too much for him to get away, to be able in a position to get away from you? Or are you going to pay him too little for him just to give up? Or are you going to pay him enough for him just to subsist and come the next day to work for you?
I must
I'm
say,
not talking about ethics here. I'm just talking about mechanistic, right, consequence of a system.
it is an ongoing difficulty to come to that right place with each person. I will tell you that part of the art of being in the employer driving seat is also to find out what else does that person want other than money. Do they want security? Do they want retirement funds? Do they want health insurance coverage? Do they want a place that supports education and advancement? Because there's a huge number of the people that move through what we do and onto other things, and we help them with that. And there's nobody that I want to insult. I don't want to steal their labor. And if I were to pay them so little that they had a rough attitude, that would come out and it would poison our business. If I pay them too much, I'm going to go out of business. So it's an ongoing calculus all the time. And part of it is to keep in a conversation. And sometimes we have to let them know, hey, we love everything that you've brought to this position, but our needs as a business are changing. And so we may have to ask you to either train in some different skills, work at a different one of our offices, or I'm sorry, I don't have a place for you here any longer, but can I give you a fabulous recommendation and try and help you move someplace else? So yeah, I will tell you, I'm glad I'm not the person that has to sit with each of our employees in that. I hire other people that are better at administration than I am.
But in that conversation, people were able to even get to that bargain. If you take in the labor supply, a sample of 100, how many are there? What is the percentage of those that can sit down with you and even discuss that with? That are socially in a way that they can think about how happy they are about their work. You know, what else, apart from money, will they need? What is your estimate of that? Out of 100 of labor supply? Because you, the employer, you're on the side of labor demand. Yeah?
Yeah.
You are the suppliers.
I would say it's probably only 20% of people people who come in with those questions, but we try and make that part of the discussion right from the start.
Yeah. So 80% are probably living from paycheck to paycheck.
And they might be when they come to work for me. I mean, you never know what somebody's situation is. Most of them don't know that I could
I mean,
out within a cut. I'm almost paycheck to paycheck.
well, I mean, Americans in general, I mean, this is something that I read again today. They essentially can't come up with $500 in a crisis. 30, at least, I think it's 67, or 63% of Americans.
Wow.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying the discussion that we're having with Susan as well. I mean, you know, what happens if her energy costs go up? And, you know, it's not as if your employees' energy costs don't go up and then they don't get a raise, right? Because it's cutting into your cost. I mean, you know, you're paying a higher bill. So that that's why inflation's so harmful, because the old saying is it makes everybody poor. And I think that this is the real risk, and this is what the balance is with Powell that they're faced with right now, is that he's like, oh my gosh, I have to, you know, kind of bring down prices of consumer goods and food in particular. And but you know, it seems like there's a fragile banking system at the same time. And you know, that's what's scary to me, is that how much of a balancing act this whole thing is. And it's not, without being on Wall Street, without being an analyst and spending, I had promised myself to spend 2 hours on it this week and I didn't get to it. But I really wanted to spend some time really looking into this deeper. But I think we are a lot more fragile than people think. And I think we're at a pause. And I do think that these banks are going to step in and help each other, and we'll get through this particular crisis until the next crisis. And,
What is?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Longer term, I think that there are some very bad signs for the U.S.
Very what?
Bad signs, as far as bad in the sense that I think debt is a huge issue. The amount of credit card debt and the amount of student loan debt. And I think the purchasing power has been eroded. I think that also there are other issues even that related to housing and things along those lines. So
Okay, let's try to check this idea. Joe, you are the best here in that. Can you explain to us what inflation is? We talk about inflation all the time. What is it?
it's a rise in prices, essentially. I mean, the bank is printing money, or the federal, their interest rates are low. People are borrowing, people are spending, and essentially that the prices of you know, food and things along those lines are going up. Then you have businesses that are basically not, you know, it's cutting into what they do, and so they're not making any money, and they're having to raise their prices. And it has this, you know, has a you know, really harmful effect on people. That's I mean,
I still
that's a
haven't
crude
got it.
way. It's a crude way of explaining it.
Yeah. So in nature, what is it? Is it a monetary phenomenon? Or is it something real?
Is it a money tree phenomenon?
Okay, so if the monetary phenomenon is not real, the effects are real, but it's not real. It's something else.
That's fair.
So that thing else can only be clipping.
Can only be what?
Clipping. That is, I have my gold coin or my
Okay.
silver coin, and then you clip it and you replace it with lead, you replace it with something else that is of less value. And you bring it to me, you say, face value, I mark it like this, it's still my gold coin. It can just be the rim of the gold coin or a silver coin that you change the metal of. In the grammage of that affects. So as it goes round, every time that it comes back, you clip. And what happened in the long run? Did you get what I say? We
The more
agree
you
that,
keep clipping,
yeah, because clip all the time, because there's a cost for clipping. Let's just take it that everything was done honestly. There's some work that is used to clip. So every time that it goes, a small amount, very tiny amount is clipped. But then, knowing what we know about systems, accumulations, and velocity,
right?
what happened cumulatively?
Value degrades.
I think that you just said the right word, Susan, value. We have been charmed into believing that price and value is the same thing.
No,
You get me?
never.
And then you
Never the
look in
same
terms,
thing.
if you look in terms of value, let's just say that if you take 1971, and then you take gold, and then you express your prices in gold, $35 bought an ounce of gold. $50 years later, $35 or an ounce of gold is $2,000. The reality is that the dollar in 1971 or 1970 ceased to exist. What you could call the silver dollar ceased to exist in 1971 to give birth to the petrodollar. And that petrodollar is not anchored. It's anchored to nothing.
Well, is it still the petrodollar menu, or is it now just the digital currency, period?
The petrodollar is dying.
Yeah.
Because the main anchor, the main tenet of it, that was the agreement between Secretary of State Kissinger and the king of the Arabian monarchy to say, we will guarantee your security in exchange of all the contracts for international sale of energy, in extension of all the commodities be expressed in dollar. is waning. Steve, you're talking and you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. I think the point you're expressing is exactly what Bucky's saying right here. And I really do think we need to continue and get this book reading.
Okay.
So if you guys have anything you need to say it, but let's continue to read is my vote. And I think we finished this whole paragraph right here, right? The US,
We did.
we've known it, is now bankrupt and extinct. And I think, Manu, everything you're saying, Susan, everything we're talking about is this idea that we're living in some kind of a financial fiction that's very convoluted. And we only know what they're going to tell us, you know. Okay, let's continue to read here. I'll read this next paragraph.
Okay.
The swift coming apart of our national economic system to make way for evolution's inexorably developing integration of a world socioeconomic system is manifest in the full-page advertisement in the Sunday New York Times of August 9, 1981, by one of the most conservative of New York savings banks. 18% interest starting now, up to $2,000 tax-free interest starting October 1st. That's where just as note, that's why I was talking about the 18% interest. For this same interest rate, Dime Savings Bank required an investment of $5,000. 20 similarly unprecedented savings banks ads appeared in the same financial section. Before 1980, U.S. savings banks had paid in the range of 4% interest. The following week, that of August 16th, the same plethora of bank advertisements appeared, with the percentage increased to 25%. By the week of August 23rd, the advertisements had been advanced to their offer to 40% interest. I never heard of 40% interest, but that's okay. This was, of course, the correctly calculated percentage of gain, but misleadingly employed. The percentage represented yield to maturity in respect to the low August purchasing price of U.S. Treasury notes maturing on October 1st, 1981, whose depressed market value indicated not only the imminence of the U.S. bankruptcy, but the expectation that this particular set of USA refunding notes at ever higher interest rates and on ever shorter maturity terms would in all probability be redeemed before common recognition of the outright bankruptcy. The advertising was deliberate and mischievously misleading in that it implied a continuing 40% interest rate if you deposited several $1,000s, whereas the interest advertised was to accrue only until October 1st, 1981. The advertisements failed to be clearly communicate that the interest rate after October 1 would be a customary savings account rate. The advertisements were hoaxes to acquire savings deposits, which the bank could loan out at much higher rates of interest. That's interesting. Comments or questions on that? I don't remember that happening.
That's, you know, you have to read what is the small characters, you know, terms and conditions of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
That's huge.
Even the FDIC bailout, it's, I remember reading something about the way that, I mean, they'll probably be paid out right away, but that they can pay them over a period of time for depositors. And I don't know if that's true or not. It was so many years ago that I looked at that. It was literally 2000.
I think it's true. I think
Yeah,
even FDIC insurance at $250,000 per account, there's fine print in there that says that they can pay you out over any time period they want.
Yeah, it's like over even, I think it's an really extreme amount of time, which is actually completely, that makes you really feel insecure.
Right.
Yeah, because you think you're insured like up to $250,000, but they pay you over 25 years. What's the difference?
Right. So, Mano, do you want to read this next paragraph here?
Okay. At this point in our review of how economic and other social conditions have evolved to such a threateningly devastating future outlook for many, if not all humans. We wish to recall that inexorable cosmic evolution is intent on integrating all humanity in one global government, and therefore on eliminating all planet Earth's nations, and on doing so in a hurry. The most difficult of all the world's sovereignties to eliminate it is clearly that of the USA. We recall having forecast this termination of USA at least 15 years ago. The 150 nations are 150 clots in the economic bloodstream of our planet. The headlong rush into the atomic holocaust is, in fact, a far more threatening development than the natural economic demise of the USA, which, in fact, may be viewed as simply a self-removing planetary economic blood clot event.
Anybody else appreciate his sense of humor?
The problem is, where else can you go? And I don't,
Right. That is a huge issue.
Yeah. Susan, do you want to read?
That
sure,
has been.
Beginning our next chapter here. The chapter is
can't.
Fool. Go ahead.
Chapter 6, Can't Fool a Cosmic Computer. It must be remembered that, as clearly elucidated in Critical Path and Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, the July 31st, 1981 issue of Publishers Weekly reported on the first U.S. Publishers Trade Fair in the People's Republic of China. Over 600 publishers and 8,000 titles were represented, with several million English-reading Chinese attending the exhibit in 6 cities. Elaine Frumer, a member of the U.S. delegation, reporting in an accompanying article entitled "What the Chinese Looked At," listed Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth first on the list she compiled of the 10 books the Chinese showed the most interest in. Money is not wealth, and that wealth is the organized technological capability to protect, nurture, educate, and accommodate the forward days of humans, whereas money is only a medium of exchange and a cash accounting system. Money has become completely monopolized by the supranational-corporation colossi, which inherently, as legal abstractions, ignore the problem of how to protect and nurture human lives.
Wow, good reading, Susan. Comments or questions?
Yeah, really.
In the very largest way of looking at planet Earth's socio-evolution events, we must observe that humans are designed with legs and not roots. Yesterday, humanity developed temporary roots as it cultivated its life support food root grown on the land. The metals made possible metal canning of food and mobilization of machinery. Today, all of human existence depends on the swift, world-around intercommunication system operating at 186,000 miles per second. We have transformed reality from Newton's at-rest norm to an Einstein's 86,000 miles per second norm. Socioeconomically, we have synchronized with the omni-intertransformative kinetics of the entire universe.
Comments or question? Of course, 186,000 miles per second is the speed of light, and is referring to our communication systems.
My question is this: are
What's
we
that?
consciously, socio-economically synchronized?
Oh,
No. No,
Well,
not
I
the
think we
slightest.
are. When the US bank collapses, Europe had the same. It was a worldwide bank collapse when the US collapsed in 2008. It's worldwide.
so I think that some of the Grunch people have. So they are supranational colossi, and I think they have synchronized the kinetics of the entire monetary, socioeconomic universe. So again, the most seditionary thing that any of us could do would be to grow some of your own food.
Food.
And I have a few plants. I'm trying to get them off the ground.
Have you heard about growing them with electricity? There's actually you put copper in there and it actually creates a field. I'll send you that link. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a very nice guy on YouTube that talks about making his supercharged compost, and he puts a small amount of minerals in there with the organics.
Yeah.
And it, it's just like you want to make sure that there's fungi in there as well. Yeah.
Oh,
So
interesting.
Okay, now the
Cool.
next question is that if that's the case, universe being what, nature being what it is nature going to dispense of Hubies?
QBs
If-
will probably do it.
If
for
we
me.
didn't synchronize,
We're taking care of that.
Uh.
Nature doesn't need to do anything. We're doing a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have another point there, Manu, that you want to make?
no, that's fine. I just wanted to make you guys laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joe, do you want to continue with planetary?
Planetary economics has now shifted from a physical land and metals capitalism to a strictly metaphysical planetary, omnicosmic wealth know-how capitalism. The once noble and essential but now obsolete nations belong to the rooted socioeconomic land capitalism era of humanity. In reality, humanity is now uprooted kinetically and occupying the whole planet. Capitalism is dumping its immobile real estate and depending on science to synchronize its affairs with the invisible realities, misassuming, however, that science knows what it is all about. To successfully dump all its real estate, capitalism has all but ceased renting, and through enforced selling of cooperatives and nothing else but condominiums, it's forcing the citizenry into anchored exploitability. Sorry, will it always while it always increasing the corporate deployability and mobile shift about ability around the world.
I love the fact that he says that humanity has been uprooted, and boy, in the last 10 years, there is major population shifts going on. Want to continue, Joe?
Sure. Since science and human inventiveness are continually learning how to produce ever more and ever better performance for each ounce of material, ERG of energy, and second of labor and overhead time invested in any and all industry production functions, the real cosmic costs are always and only decreasing. And all price increasing, as already noted, is corporate selfishness gotten away with by political campaign obligations and by excruciatingly painful behind the scenes corporate lobbyist congressional bullying.
Let's pause right there for a second. I hate to quote Bernie Sanders because that makes me a socialist, Democrat, progressive, but he was talking about how unreasonable it is that here we create a technology to make someone's job easier, and instead of bringing the technology and having the increased profits and sharing that with the person, they bring the technology and fire people and then have the people that were there work for the same amount of money. So businesses are making, this is the point Bucky's brought up several times in here, businesses are making more and more money because it's taking ever less resources to create the same value, and they're paying their employees less and less. So that just reinforces that point right there. Any other comments or questions?
I got
I
it.
don't know.
No,
I
the-
don't,
the
yeah,
late-
it's
Not my
not-
reality as a lawyer.
Yeah,
I- I'll just say I don't understand this very well. I had the impression that Bucky was very optimistic
Yeah,
and that he
Um,
downplayed many times the power of capture of all of those value added by few. Am I right, or I'm not understanding properly?
I think in the end, just like me, he decided to be an optimist, but it's only because the alternative really stunk.
Right.
And the
That's fair.
alternative is certainly completely plausible.
And before he left, he should have said, I turned my mantle over to Bernie Sanders.
You know, I will say this though, there's a lot of things when it comes to labor that people have to consider. We're looking locally, and even Bucky's looking locally here. And he's looking at the United States, and he's not looking at the planet, the whole global economy. And you know, you have to consider the fact that a lot of people have been lifted out of poverty globally. And you have to consider the fact that there are a lot of people that are now part of the workforce that were not. And yes, US workers are paying the price for that in many cases. But in some ways, it's not as bleak as this is I think is saying. That's my opinion. But I do think there are systemic issues in the US, which actually makes it problematic globally.
Yeah.
But the labor market is very hard to assess.
Joe,
And I don't think Bernie.
I agree with you,
Go
it's
ahead.
everywhere. It's everywhere. You know,
Yeah,
it is. The issue is with the technological globalization, because really technology is global now.
yeah.
Things
Well,
that happens anywhere to a certain, especially in the US, to a certain degree, happens somewhere else. And it doesn't happen somewhere else with lack, it's at the same time. If I would tell you that when interest rates are set by the Fed, the next day here, they adjust it. It's not a week later. I'm saying again, when your monetary committee, policy committee meet, and the increase or decrease rate, adjustment is immediate. So US rates actually set global rates. It's not a fantasy,
that's
it's true, it's true.
the old saying is that if the United States coughs, the rest of the world gets a cold. You know, and so yeah, I mean, there's a certain truth to that.
No, it is, it's not certain, Joe. It is.
Yeah.
Right? And it's on on food issue, on climate issue, on whatever. It would take, the fundamental will be there. It will take some local toning, but the fundamental discussion will be there. It is so pervasive. So the problems have become really, the challenges have become really global. Now, there are solutions. Are we applying those solutions in a way that they globally have an impact? That is for wealth creation. That is a capability to produce, not to protect, nurture, educate, and accommodate forward days of human. So the question is, where is wealth that is being created, or where is value added that is being created going to? Is it used to protect, educate, nurture, and accommodate our forward days?
No, it's used to I don't want to use the word enslave, but that's what it is.
Yeah. So Bucky was right. He said there's a creative value, right? That is created. Do you agree to that?
I agree. Absolutely.
Massive accretive value. But it's being captured. And it's being captured mostly by the financial system.
Oh, I agree with that.
And that's his
I
point.
mean, that part, there are a lot of economists that are actually calling attention to that. So, I mean, it's that is seen as one of the main problems in finance right now. And I think one of the statistics that I'm just looking at now, global finance has become a Ponzi scheme. This is an economist named Mariana Mazzucata who wrote, 80% of the financing goes back into the financial firms, while manufacturing, agriculture, technology, and public services suffer. FIRE, which is finance is only financing, finance is only financing real estate, essentially insurance and finance. FIRE profits are private, FIRE losses are public, a moral hazard. This destroys the incentive to innovate. The current structure fuels a debt-ridden system and a speculative bubbles that, when they burst, big banks and others go begging for government bailouts. So essentially, if 80% of the financing goes back into financial firms, that's not a whole lot that's actually going into the market that actually is getting used for productivity.
Okay, let's continue.
I even think that is deeper than that, Joe. You remember what you call the quants?
Yes.
It starts at a very education level where the best brains are sucked by the banks for monetary gains. You take a cohort of high schoolers getting into the best institutions, having the best training, and they are sucked by the financial system. So it leaves the manufacturing, the primary sector, and all those starving for good talent. They don't have a talent. And then there's a double blow of the inflation that we're talking about. Right. The inflation is only, that's Milton Friedman, a monetary phenomenon.
Right on.
So you are diluting, yes, you are diluting the value of the other sectors apart from the financial. And that's why the financial sector control today more than 50% of the world economy. Maybe 50 is even very conservative. They control everything.
Very conservative. Let's continue to read. Do you want to go?
I can go. I can keep
paragraph two.
Sure. In 1940, 2 years before the U.S. entered World War II, the president of the Aluminum Company of America became interested in my use of congruated aluminum. Did I say that correctly? In
corrugated.
Corrugated. Thank you. Aluminum in the Dymaxion deployment unit, which was the little mass-producible autonomous one-room dwelling machine that I had developed for a group of Scottish leaders, intent on anticipating the wholesale bombing of England's industrial cities, who had proposed accommodation of the surely to be displaced population in thousands of my Dymaxion deployment units to be installed on the Scottish moorlands. I was developing these development units at Butler Manufacturing Company in Kansas City. I was doing this by converting Butler's mass production 20-foot diameter galvanized steel grain bins into autonomous $1,500 well-insulated fireproof, earthquake-proof kerosene icebox and stove, Sears Roebuck finished, ready to move into unit.
Cool. So he's
That
building
was a
the,
mouthful.
yeah, and he's building these things. Mobile homes, mobile facilities. I'll continue. The Butler
Thank you.
grain bins had been developed for the US government Ever Normal Granary program. The Alcoa president hoped that I would switch from corrugated galvanized iron grain bins to corrugated aluminum bins. He told me that the cost of aluminum would always decrease. He said that the main cost was that of the electrolyte refining of bauxite ore into aluminum. He said the cost of electricity for the process was always decreasing as he learned to produce ever more kilowatt hours per each BTU of fossil fuel expended. Aluminum, he said, is one of nature's most abundant elements. The wholesale price of aluminum in 1940, when Alcoa's president made that statement to me, was 12 cents a pound. Today, it is selling for over $1 a pound. Not because the Alcoa president was wrong in what he said, but because massively organized selfishness has dishonestly changed the scoring system. Comments or questions while we find a new page?
Do you remember what he said money is? In relationship to the scoring system. He said, he defined higher up, money is only a medium of exchange and a cash
Right.
accounting system.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
think that was pretty cool. I almost highlighted it. Cool. I'll read this next paragraph and then Manu, you can read. It is
Okay.
evident that the degree of technical advantage now attained by world-around industrial production capability, if realistically appraised and articulated, now shows that all humanity has just reached a state of comprehensive technical advantage adequate to provide a billionaire's level of living in an indefinitely sustainable base for all of the over 4 billion human passengers now aboard Spaceship Earth. See critical path. The world's economic accounting system, if properly entered into the world's computers, will quickly indicate that comprehensive economic success for all humanity is now realizable within a design science decade. All it takes is shifting from weaponry to living production. You know, about every couple of weeks, I go to lunch with somebody, and our tradition is to go to Chuckarama. And we sit in Chuckarama and marvel how much food there is. And this idea of having a billionaire's level of living, there are kings through the ages of time who couldn't imagine having the food in front of them that's at Chuckarama on a Friday afternoon. Just it's mind-boggling. And we always
Okay,
talk about that. We're having the Feast of Kings.
let's take an example really today, Steve, with
Okay.
numbers that we know. Okay, take Ukraine.
We talk about Ukraine. We figure out
Okay,
how
let's just take,
we could do
take it.
DoorDash lunches to Ukraine. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's just take the numbers in Ukraine. The US has put $100 billion plus. $350 billion of Russian assets have been seized. The Russians have put at least that amount. I would say Ukraine has wasted $1 trillion. Is it something that we can agree on about? Now imagine that this $1 trillion were invested in Africa, because Ukraine is only egos. It's a war of egos. Do we agree to that?
Yeah.
It is a war. It's been started. The people of Ukraine didn't ask for anything. It is some leaders that are causing the problem.
Yeah.
So imagine then that $1 trillion was spent in Africa on real things. Africa is about 1 billion of population. that would be $1,000 per African. Do you see what it can do to the world?
Oh, that's yeah,
And
absolutely.
that
I think
solve US immigration problems or alleviated or Europeans. You don't need to wonder about the borders anymore. Because there's no reason for somebody who is well at home to seek to go, other than leisure or going and coming back. People seek to live where they are because it's not, it's not comfortable to what they expect.
Absolutely.
right.
Okay.
No, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean,
Go ahead. Go
ahead.
ahead.
no,
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 go ahead.
I'm done. It's fine. It's really is fine.
I just posted, I found the quote Manu made, the quote Manu stated about money, and I posted it in the chat. So Bucky's
Yeah.
definition of wealth and money is in the chat now.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
All right. What were we? I was to read.
Yeah, history unprecedentedly.
Okay. Can you remove the fine that your
I did.
previous, no, fine is still there on the screen. Okay.
No, it isn't.
Okay. History's unprecedentedly large and invisible supranational Grunch of Giants, being too supra and infra visibly large to be sensitively comprehended, it is difficult to surmise and accredit that the almost omni-computerized giant may be evolution's agent of most effective establishment of a world-embracing socio-economic system, most logically suited for the mass production and distribution of its products and services to economically successful humanity. It could well be that the total world involved supranational giant corporations' computer operating mind, to their corporate directors' astonishment and to popular surprise, lead the Grunch into profitable discard of all that is not true, as for instance that anybody owns anything. Commonly acknowledged operational custodianship and popular re-accreditation of the integrated world-around technology management may supplant ownership with hertz and telephone renting. The way that the giant can be successfully led into doing so is for a substantial majority of humanity, and eventually all humanity, realistically, to comprehend the falsity of the greater part of the inventory of academic premises and actions, upon which the thus misconditioned reflection of educated society is based. For instance, there is no God-validated deed to property of any kind whatsoever. There are no solid, there are no things, only systemic complexes of events interacting in pure principle. There is no up or down in the universe. There is no cubic structure. There are no straight lines. There is no 1, 2, or 3 dimensionality. There is only 4 and 6 dimensionality, etc. As we eliminate that which isn't true, we inadvertently admit into reality that which is true. As world society divests itself of that which experimental evidence demonstrates to be true and embracingly enters into its computer and mathematical formulae of all that can be experimentally proven to be true, all the socially, selfishly malignant characteristic of a giant may vanish, and the omni-pro-social advantage producing capability may prevail and flourish. Wow, it's poetically engineered.
Yeah, and we'll have Susan read the next part, but are there any comments or questions on what Manu just read? You know, he sounds very Native American here. There's no God-validated deed to property of any kind whatsoever. And
But
he
do you know
said-
that
Well,
there is no 5-dimensionality, John, Steve?
well, he says there are no solids, there are no things, and then there's only 4 and 6 dimensions. He doesn't
Yes.
acknowledge.
Do you know that? Do you know why?
Well, the 4 dimensions is the tetrahedron, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure why the 6.
The 6 is what? It's something that we discuss about. What is it?
6 degrees of freedom.
Yes, but what
Is
is
that what
it?
it is?
What does it? What unity does it express?
3.
Is a volumetric unity.
It's of the edges, right?
The cubo-octahedron
Yeah,
is a
okay.
volume what? 6. And the cubo-octahedron is a domain of what?
We're talking about a cube octahedron. You're talking
Yes.
cube octahedron.
Yes. Is a volume 6.
And it's implied inside each tetrahedron.
No, but it is what? It is the
cube
domain of what?
octahedron- The cube
Yes.
octahedron is the jitterbug. It is the equilibrium.
But I want you to tell me what is the domain of. That is, what does it, everything is included into it. Is a domain of spheres.
Yeah.
Is bigger than the sphere. The sphere neatly fit into the cuboctahedron.
Well, I thought each vertex was a sphere.
No, the sphere. Let me.
I see. Vector equilibrium is cube octahedron, and therefore vector equilibrium is a sphere, which does relate back to the 6 degrees of freedom that Susan said.
It's written here. What I just is one of the things that I wanted to solve in cosmography. If you look at cosmography,
What page?
page 59.
Okay.
Or 60, page 60.
I'm looking at my PDF file now, and I'll bring up page 59. And we'll see if your book and my PDF file are anywhere similar.
So volumetrically, unity is at the minimum of 6.
So this is page 59 and 50 and 60 of my book, but this also says page 108, so 106. So let's go back a little ways.
Yes, let's just take that reference. Let me look in my book. That 5 that you have.
Oh, there's 58. There's page 58. That's a cube octahedron.
Yes, there. Next one.
The
You see,
next
that is
page,
the cubic, that's the rhombic. Look at that, the volumes.
right here is rhombic.
No, the left. Just the page there. No, the same page. Look at the
Well-
polyhedron and volume. No. See, go back to where you were.
I don't know what you mean. There's a time delay, Manu. This is page 35 and 36. This is page 58.
You see on the top, you see page 59 on your document. You see that?
Okay, yeah.
You just go to next to it.
Okay, that's the cube octahedron. There we go. That's page 60.
Okay, so see here, look at the volume. There is there on this page.
I see. Rhombic dodecahedron is 6.
Yes, that's the cuboctahedron. The same. Now, go back to the previous page. The one where you have, and you read there, you see that all sphere, like we just discovered that the 12 diamond face, all space filling rhombic dodecahedra are the all space filling domains of each of the closest packed unit radius sphere, whose closest packing is also that of all atoms.
Where are you reading from, Manu?
Just there, the second paragraph or the third.
You can
On
see
the
that.
left.
I can-
Yeah.
On page 59 or page 58?
59.
He also has the book, guys.
No, I was gonna say, like, that's
This is what you're reading right here. Is this
My
paragraph?
eyes are
Yes.
are straining.
And then you go, a sphere fit neatly inside the rhombic dodecahedron, with each of the dodecahedron 12 mid-diamond face. You know, you go to the bottom of a page.
Oh,
You
I
can
see.
select that to the bottom, from where you are to the bottom.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
A sphere fits neatly inside the rhombic dodecahedron, which is, you're saying, the cube octahedron, right?
Yes.
With each of the dodecahedron's 12 and mid-diamond faces tangent to the enclosed sphere at the same 12 points of tangency of the 12 spheres closest packing around one another. And that's probably referred to this figure 2.9 up at the top left hand of that page.
Yeah, bro, that is it. So if you take a sphere, you see that ball, that the rhombic dodecahedron that is on top.
Yeah.
You imagine a sphere inside. You say no, to the page 59. You see that there are 12.
Well,
There are
these two
12
are the same.
rhombuses, right?
These
Yes.
are the same. These are 210 and 29 are the same. These are both rhombic dodecahedron. But this is
But
managed.
let's consider the 210. 210.
Okay.
If you take 210,
Yeah.
you see that there are 12 rhombuses faces, right?
Right.
So if you take a sphere inside and then you inflate it, it will come tangent at 12 points to the 12 faces.
By the way, the rhombic is that square. A rhombus
Yes.
is a square that is not square. It's this diamond shape.
You call it also parallelogram.
Yeah, the parallelogram or trapezoid, right?
Yeah.
All right. And so like a square, the cube octahedron or the rhombic dodecahedron has squares and these rhombics that are, what did he call them? Crap, I've said it twice. They're called diamonds. He calls them diamonds. And he calls them at one point hinged diamonds when there's a line going across the middle of it. He calls it a hinged diamond. This all goes back to jitterbug. I'm doing jitterbug stuff right now. What, Joe?
That's interesting. I just said.
Yeah.
Okay, go to the next page, Steve.
Okay.
Next to this. Okay, just hold there. Very interesting. You see, when the vector edge regular tetrahedron volume is 1, we know that, right? It's a unit of account.
Okay.
The vector edge octahedron is exactly 4. The symmetrically interjoined positive negative tetrahedron 8 corners overall all cube has exactly the volume of 3. We agree to that. And then the rhombic dodecahedron has a volume of 6, meaning the volumetric unit of all space filling is exactly 6. All space unity equals 6. Unity is plural and volumetrically at minimum of 6.
Yeah, next time somebody says unity is plural, I'm going to finish the end of that sentence and blow their mind.
But you have to say volumetric. You have
Yeah.
to specify your
I have to
unit.
say volumetrically a minimum of 6.
Yep.
That's cool.
That's where you have your 6 degrees of freedom, Susan.
Interesting.
You can move in each direction in a tetrahedron. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And if you look at that diagram on the previous page, what you get is the flower of life.
Oh yeah. Right here. This is Metatron's cube.
Yep. That's the beauty of it. I found these 2 pages. Really, I was reading them the other day. I wanted to bring them up on Wednesday. Remember, we were late. It's so beautiful. And it's so poetic.
I think that will I think we'll just, for the demonstration for the video here, we'll show this flower of life thing, the symbolism, because this is profound. Because there are so many shapes that come off of this. And you can see all the spheres in here. That's screwed up by that yellow coloring.
Mhm.
But
But
there-
the yellow is there because it has to radiate.
yeah,
Mhm.
Because what you are showing is gravity in the form of a rhombus, of a rhombic dodecahedron, but it has to shine also. And shine from in out.
right.
And that's the yellow.
And for those who don't know sacred geometry, there's the seed of life, the flower of life. There's about, there are, and in here is a Merkaba is in here, the double tetrahedrons in here, Metatron's cube is in here, Metatron's cube. All of this comes back to this basic shape, which is basically just circles, which is the way energy manifests. And even Einstein said that gravity causes, there are no straight lines, that everything is curved. And if you start walking in the universe, you'll eventually run into yourself. And
Did you see the advertisement there?
this guy over here, the ad with the babies.
Yeah, there's no straight line. Does that baby go straight line? Zero.
Very cool.
There's one coming down.
Okay, so coming back to Buckminster Fuller,
Okay.
and then leaving behind cosmography and moving back to Grunch of the Giants. I think we're right here. And Susan, is it your time to read? I think it is.
No, I've read all of that.
Is
all
this-
the
Then you
yeah.
have to read the
Oh, that's
poetry.
right. Susan was going to read the poem. I was looking forward to Susan's reading of the poem. Hang on, let me get some pages up here so you don't.
I got carried when the poetry was,
Yeah.
and I moved you guys away.
Okay. 15th to 19th century Giants Oath. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of a British man. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. 20th to 21st century Giants Oath. Steal,
Sorry.
kudos, and credit American.
Hang
Oh.
on, you have to put this first line in front of it. I'm so sorry.
We fort 5 Hun. Steal, kudos, and credit American. Be it live checking or savings dead. There's no dividend bread.
So this is how Buckminster Fuller would do Saturday Night Live. This is his
Yes.
idea of comedy.
But do you realize that Bucky was first and foremost a poet?
Oh, how wonderful.
That's
I
why he
thought-
doesn't have prose. He doesn't have prose in his writing.
Well, I could
takes-
never have told it by this last couple of stanzas that Susan just read.
Well, there is that.
Remember, he was a drinking man for a while.
That's right.
You notice that he writes his sentences without punctuations. It doesn't stop until the whole idea is expressed of how he's feeling. So it doesn't write by technique, he writes by feel. And that's what poets do.
Okay, cool. So Susan, do you want to continue to read here?
Sure. Each of the giants of today's great grunch is a quadrillion-fold more formidable than was Goliath. Each is entirely invisible, abstract, and completely ruthless. Not because those who run the show are malevolent, but because the giant is a non-human corporation, a many centuries old royal legal advisor invented institution. The giant is a so one-sidedly biased abstract legal invention that its exploitation by the power structures of 30 generations have made the XYZ corporations and companies seemingly as much a part of nature as the phases of the moon and the clouds of the skies. Corporations operate on an unnatural economic basis that makes a successful the Las Vegas roulette bet a trifling success. If you bet your money on the fortunate corporation, your bet is paid and repaid to you quarterly, continually, ad infinitum, often more copiously each year. And assuming an investment of 100 shares at a cost of $2,700 in IBM in 1914, when the company was first formed, it would have grown by June 1959 to 59,320 share values at $19,308,900 plus $1,089,000 in cash and stock dividends and an additional $101,906 from rights and privileges. As I have frequently recalled, the grossly mis- or underinformed 95% illiterate world society of 1900 misassumed the existence of a fundamental and dire inadequacy of life support to be operative on our planet. Wherefore, it concluded, and the political economic system as yet maintains, that it has to be only one or the other of the planet Earth's two great political ideologies which can survive, and that all people governed by the loser must perish. There is not enough for both.
In quotes. Comments or questions? You know, this idea about this corporation thing, and I've said this before, but I just looked it up, and Tom Hartman is a radio personality guy. He's a psychotherapist, but he's also written a book on economic history. And his research showed that corporations were not allowed in America as part of the revolution, that the East India Tea Company and all these corporations that were running the British Empire was what America was rebelling against. And it wasn't until, from my understanding and my memory, and I could be wrong on this, so find the facts and tell me, it wasn't until Henry Ford, and that wasn't Henry Ford, it was they were trying to build a bridge across in New York City, build the Brooklyn Bridge. They wanted to fund the bridge, so they created a corporation to do that and allowed a bunch of people to invest. And the corporation was supposed to last for 99 years and be disbanded. And of course, it's still existing today. Just thought I'd throw that.
There's a documentary I watched years ago, and it captures the idea of the corporation. Just the history, the whole history behind it. It's called the
Right.
corporation.
So let's see, I think Manu, or is it, I think it's Joe. Joe, if you want to read now, is it your turn? I think we're rotating through, so go ahead. Whoever's
Sure.
next.
As I frequently recalled, the grossly or uninformed 95% illiterate world society of 1900 misassumed the existence of a fundamental and dire inadequacy of life support to be operative on our planet. Wherefore it concluded, and the political and economic as yet maintains, as it yet maintains that it has to be only one or the other of the planet Earth's two great political ideologies which can survive, and that all the people governed by the loser must perish. There is not enough for both.
Yeah, we needed to hear that again. You need to hear it again for sure. So continue reading.
The now predominantly illiterate world population of 1981 has developed an intuitive awareness of the ideological and ever madness of all political systems. All the forging inadequate life support misassuming by both political parties and all the major religious organization, as earlier noted, has resulted in both sides having jointly spent $6.5 trillion in developing the present capability to destroy all humanity within 1 hour. Humanity at large is logically intuiting at the same sum spent in the direction of improving the lives of the presently deprived many might readily have brought about better results than race suicide.
Okay, let's stop there. I forgot what time it was. We were having so much fun. We'll pause there. We'll continue next time, right at this particular point. And I mean, it's time, so it's probably time to close it out. Manu, how are you feeling, and what's your takeaway tonight?
I feel like there is, I'm amazed at how current what Bucky is talking about here it is. And in regard to what we face today, I think that Bucky was very optimistic. Because type 1 evolution is only too prevalent. They have captured everything. I don't know if it is just something that will pass, but it is a reality that we live. The second thing is that I don't know if people are really educated, as they say. Because if we look at the craziness that is happening in the world, for example, in terms of cryptos and all these things that have happened, unfocusing people and wasting their hard-earned resources into things that are really just an illusion, has been a big issue to me and is very concerning. So real education is not that popular and is not that ubiquitous. If it's not ubiquitous, we have really, I think, a mission to finding ways. Like Susan, you mentioned the lady, I don't know if you or Joe, who wrote synergetic, like summarize her own way of understanding synergetic in a way that she feels is more understandable by people. We need to really make these ideas known for people to pivot, because it is, in my opinion, very, very important to understand what's going on in the world, to even stand a chance of anything. Because pollution is all everywhere. Because if you capture the produce, the add value, it becomes pollution because you can't keep it. Mm-hmm. It is moving. You have the illusion that you are keeping it, but it's fragilizing you. So in a whole, you are more fragile, and it's going. It hasn't solved the problems and the issues that we have. So that's the hope that I have, that people will become more aware and act more in terms of really identifying what it is that is in this world, and positioning and acting in a way that, favors the non-suicide of our species. So that's what the hope that I take from this. Susan, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I feel enriched for having a time with you folks. I'm watching how tired Joe looks, and I'm realizing that with daylight savings time, it's now 1 a.m. Since we have now evolved this call to what it is now, Manu, would you be opposed to moving this call 1 hour earlier?
That would be 4 a.m. He can't do that.
Oh, no. Okay. So it can't happen. All right.
No.
Yeah, no, hard limits. And so thank you, because I don't have you in my world clock, and I should. As much as I love this, if it's just us four and we're together on Wednesdays, I'm not sure that this is long-term sustainable. And thank you, Manu, for being so unbelievably cheerful at this early moment in your day. Yeah, I do think that it is good for us to realize that there is still a possibility that all this amazing craziness is type 2 evolution. and that it is possible that people may decide that what they really want and what they really demand is living ring, and that they don't want to be zombie accomplices of their governments or the economic mandates of Grunch. It's funny, I was in the recovery room at my hospital yesterday, and I had a couple of guys, we were talking about the new zombie fungus movie, The Last of Us, which I haven't watched yet. And it was interesting to hear like two dudes say, yeah, well, if it's zombie apocalypse, I'm out. Because that's always been my argument. It's like, I've had a good life. I'm an appetizer in the donor party, enjoy. But maybe we are getting to the point where more and more people are going to wake up and just not want to play the games. The games aren't real. There is more than enough. If we had a way to share better, we could take the leftover, what is it, 40 or 50% of the food in America is wasted. Be more than happy to share a lot of it. And I think probably a lot of people would be happy to share. And I must admit, I hit up against my own little like precepts when you say you can't own anything, and yet how much of my life have I spent trying to own homes or own the means of production so that I could provide services and a living for my family. So I have to kind of wrestle with where I'm at on why I'm attached to that. But Joe, how are you feeling, and what would you like to take away from tonight?
I'm feeling a little bit tired, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling very fortunate to be here with everybody. It is a blessing. I'm actually putting together a learning plan for the year for myself. And there's a couple of areas that I'm going to refocus on that I haven't looked at in a long time. And it's mostly due to Grunch of the Giants just exposing me to, just some new ways of thought, but also some things that I need to brush up on when it comes to markets anyway. So that I'm looking forward to, actually. I'm going to make an effort to do that a little bit more. As far as the idea of the people not necessarily being educated, I agree with that. And I think that there's a bigger issue is that when you saw that like these movements, whether it be the Tea Party or the Occupy Wall Street movements, there are individuals that know that something wrong, but know that something is desperately wrong, but they don't necessarily know how to articulate it. And I think that this somehow people need to be made aware of some of the systemic problems that we have so that they understand, so that we can move forward constructively. How that's going to happen, I do not know. But the one thing is that I agree with Susan. There is hope in the sense that we do have enough, and we just need to look at how things are distributed. And I think that we just need to reimagine how a lot of these systems function. And I think it is possible to do that. I truly do. So that part, I don't think little tweaks to the system are going to do it, but I think it has to be reimagined in a holistic way. And I'm not saying you have to blow anything up, but you do have to reimagine it. So those are just some of my thoughts. One of the main things I'm also taking away from this is that the money is not wealth. And that's clear, and that quote in particular, that money is not wealth, that wealth is the organized technological capability to protect, nurture, educate, and accommodate the forward days of humans, whereas money is only a medium of exchange and a cash accounting system. I think that that's an incredibly powerful line. So that's something I emailed it to myself, and I'm gonna refer that. And so I got a lot out of it tonight. I got a lot in the sense that feedback, in the sense that I need to, you know, refocus my efforts in some of these concepts, and then integrate what we've read here with Grunch. Steve, how do you feel? What are you taking away from today?
Well, I'm real grateful for everybody here, and I am concerned about the sustainability of this call. If I were in a rock and roll band, I probably wouldn't be here on Saturday nights. You know, in fact, I've got my daughter's program is coming up next week, next Saturday. I'm going to go to that program. She runs a ballet dance school, and she has an annual thing. I think I'm going to be able to walk out at and just in time to start this call, and I'll just do the call in the parking lot there, about an hour away from my house. I'll tell you though, I would miss not being able to go through this. I would like to read Synergetics with everybody, and I would hope it'd be a good time for everybody. And I think cosmography is just too damn deep for me. But maybe Synergetics wouldn't be this time, and I think that'd be a good lead up to cosmography. Maybe, I don't know. We need to talk about what we're going to do in the future. It's been nice to have Ann on the call. It's been nice to have Julian on the call. It's been nice to have John on the call. It'd be great to get their sentiments as to what they want to do and how they want to continue. And I'm going to do everything I can to support this. Just to let you know, we only have 5 pages left of this book. Tonight, we started at page 48 and we ended at page 52. So we read 5 pages tonight. And we took a lot of time talking about stuff in between. So I'm pretty sure we're going to finish this book off next week. And then we're going to have to decide what we want to do. Listen, I'm real positive about how I see young kids.
Can you, Steve, can you stop the recording for that purpose?
I want to finish my summary of my takeaways here, and then I'll stop the recording. Back in the 80s, when I was telling you I was doing all this investing and stuff at really high interest rates, and I was in the game, and I just really got sick of it. And I got sick of it because people weren't accountable, people weren't their word, the law isn't enough. You know, I have what I call the 2 golden rules of partnership. Number 1 is never do a partnership with someone with whom you would not do that on a handshake. If you wouldn't do it on a handshake, don't do it. And the second rule is never do a partnership on a handshake. You know, I think there's both of those rules are really important. You have to have honorable people, and you got to have really good rules to keep honorable people honorable when the stuff hits the fan. And I can remember having a conversation with my brother-in-law at that time, who was at that time he had a sheep herd down in southern Utah, and they were starving. They were sheep herders. They had like an overhead of like 200 grand a year to keep or maybe higher, to keep their sheep going, and there was no market for their sheep. The brokers were making all the money. The brokers that were selling the sheep to the butchers and selling the wool, they were making all the money. And here he was farming, working 20-hour days some days, and not making any money. And at that time, I thought of creating some kind of a co-op. And I think there's hope. I think when the stuff hits the fan and everything breaks down, people will start to do the cooperating that we need to do, that Bucky talks about, that we'll start taking care of each other by working together. I'm hopeful of that. Somehow I think that it could all crash tomorrow, and we could go to our local farmers and create co-ops and make sure that they got taken care of and we got taken care of. Maybe I'm just crazy, but that's what I think. So my takeaway is that, boy, it's just amazing how how I always like to say the biggest conspiracy is ignorance. And I think that's what the Grunch of the Giants does, is kind of, it's unconspiring. It opens up and says, hey, stop being ignorant. So I'm grateful that we're reading this book, and I'm grateful that we're taking the time to talk about it. That's my takeaway for today. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording because we're going to have whatever we're going to